In August 2013, Bosnia and Herzegovina ranked as the 13th best national team in the men's game, as per FIFA's World Rankings, above the likes of England and France. The Dragons, as they had only recently become known, had gone a whole year without tasting defeat. It was a run of 9 games, 8 of which resulted in victories, against nations including Algeria, Greece and Wales. Over the next 2 months, further victories against Slovakia, Liechtenstein and Lithuania saw Bosnia qualify for not just their first ever FIFA World Cup, but their first major tournament. Several Bosnians had starred for Yugoslavia, who reached 2 World Cup semi-finals and 2 Euros finals, but since gaining independence, for Bosnia, it had been a tale of close but no cigar. They came close to reaching the 2010 World Cup and Euro 2012, losing to Portugal in the playoffs on both occasions, but they avoided a third successive sudden death meeting with Cristiano Ronaldo by topping their group to qualify for the 2014 World Cup, finishing level on points with Greece, but with a vastly superior goal difference. Edin Dzeko, who won a second Premier League title at Manchester City that season, was Bosnia's own Ronaldo, scoring 10 goals in 10 games in qualifying, which was, incidentally, the second most of any player in UEFA qualifying, 1 goal shy of Robin van Persie, but 2 clear of Cristiano Ronaldo and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. The 2014 World Cup didn't quite go as planned for Bosnia, as narrow defeats against Argentina and Nigeria saw them eliminated, despite winning 3-1 against Iran. Nonetheless, there was a great deal of excitement surrounding the Dragons' future prospects, as the national team provided a rare ray of light in an otherwise deeply conflicted and divided nation. 10 years on from that high point of World Cup qualification and ranking above England and France in the FIFA World Rankings, Bosnia haven't qualified for a single major tournament since 2014. The Bosnian Football Association and league system is in crisis and racked by corruption, and a recent 2-0 home defeat against Luxembourg, a nation of only 600,000 people, felt like an all-time low. Bosnia now ranks 63rd in the FIFA World Rankings, below the likes of Qatar, Burkina Faso, and Panama. Bosnia's neighbours Croatia, meanwhile, have made the last 4 of the last 2 World Cups, finishing 3rd in 2022 and 2nd in 2018. It is a pretty staggering demise on Bosnia's part over an awfully short period of time, made all the more painful by the unifying influence of Bosnian football a decade ago, and in light of their neighbours' extraordinary success. It's for that reason that I was recently, in July, asked to take a look at the sorry state of Bosnian football and the messy political context that has brought this crisis about. So, today, that is exactly what we're going to do. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to Sarajevo, to a nation that was ravaged by war and genocide just 30 years ago, where football briefly provided a bright spark which has since been emphatically extinguished, as we take a look at a nation divided, a football association blighted by corruption, and a national team that has gone from holding their own at a FIFA World Cup to losing against Luxembourg in barely the blink of an eye. I began the introduction at the high point of 2014 World Cup qualification, but the build-up to 2014 was also fairly tumultuous. Though Bosnia declared independence in March 1992, following the breakup of Yugoslavia, the Yugoslav Wars meant no Yugoslav representatives at either the 1994 World Cup or Euro 96, and Bosnia finished 4th out of 5 teams in 1998 World Cup qualifying as the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. By the time the 3.5-year war in Bosnia came to an end, in March 1995 with the signing of the Dayton Accords, more than 100,000 people had been killed and over 2 million displaced. That was over half of Bosnia's total population, meanwhile the nation's infrastructure lay in ruins. Though Sarajevo is a wonderful city to visit now, anyone who has ever been there will have seen that the wounds of the Bosnian War are still very pronounced. Those scars are even more firmly implanted in the minds of Bosnians themselves. Beginning in April 1992, Serbia, under the leadership of Slobodan Milosevic, set out to ethnically cleanse Bosnian territory of Bosnian Muslims, known as Bosniaks, and cleanse was the term that the Serbian leadership used at the time. Mass atrocities ensued, most of them, and their methods, far too graphic and appalling for me to detail here, without running the risk of this video being demonetized. The Srebrenica massacre in July 1995 was the crescendo of Milosevic and the VRS's genocide, as over 8,000 men and boys were rounded up and killed in mass executions in the space of less than 3 weeks. The Dayton Accords brought an end to war in Bosnia, but not to conflict or division. In some ways, in fact, it only served to cement them. The warring parties agreed to Bosnia and Herzegovina becoming a single sovereign state, but one that would consist of 2 parts: the largely Serb-populated Republika Srpska and the mainly Bosniak and Croat-populated Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It also established probably one of the most complicated, unwieldy, and dysfunctional political structures in the entire world. Without getting too bogged down in the politics or demographics, because this is a video about football, I promise you, Bosnia's population is roughly 50% Bosniak, sometimes referred to as Bosnian Muslims, just under 1/3 Serb, and a touch over 15% Croat. About 2% have no affiliation to any of those 3 groups, but we need not complicate things even further by even thinking about them. During the Bosnian War, vast numbers of Bosniaks were either killed or displaced in what is now the Republika Srpska, which comprises almost exactly half, 48%, of the land area of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and is home to just shy of 35% of the country's population. The Dayton Accords were controversial because, well, for a lot of reasons, but partly because they entrenched Serbia's ethnic cleansing and made no attempt to reintegrate Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs. Meanwhile, few of the promises that were made to Bosnian Muslims, in terms of compensation or of a right of return, were ever delivered. The Dayton Accords were supposed to be a peace settlement upon which Bosnia could build a more peaceful and prosperous future, but almost 3 decades on, they remain its de facto constitution. Bosnia's political structures, therefore, remain deeply fractured. To assuage the concerns of all 3 ethnic groups, a consociational democracy was established in Bosnia, ostensibly to ensure that all sides would retain political representation. Crazy as this may sound to anyone who is unfamiliar with the Balkans, in each election cycle, Bosnia basically elects 3 presidents: a Bosniak president, a Croat president, and a Serb president. The Bosniak and Croat members are elected from a joint constituency in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, whilst the Serb member is elected from voters in Republika Srpska. The 3 elected representatives then form a 3-member body known as the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where they each take it in turns leading the body, and serving as president, for 8 months at a time over the course of a 4-year term. If you're thinking that sounds absolutely mental, and as though nothing would ever get done, then yes, you would be quite right. The focus on ethnic divisions and representation means political priorities and broader policy programs tend to be overlooked. And even when that isn't the case, the overall lack of leadership makes it difficult for parties and presidential members to get anything done. The presidency, and indeed politics, are just one of the ways in which Bosnia is divided, but it extends to practically every facet of public life, including football. In April 2011, for example, the Football Association of Bosnia and Herzegovina was suspended by both FIFA and UEFA with immediate effect, owing to the fact that Bosnian football's governing body wasn't adhering to a UEFA statute which dictated that all national football associations must have a single president. The Football Association of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you will probably have guessed by now, had 3 presidents, one for each of the country's constituent ethnicities. Outcry over the suspension in Bosnia, where football is by far the most popular sport, led to a compromise being struck. The late Ivica Osim, one of Bosnia's greatest ever players and managers, was appointed sole president of the association, and after less than 2 months, Bosnia's FIFA and UEFA suspensions were lifted. Osim was the ideal compromise candidate for presidency, since, in addition to being a widely revered football legend, he was neither Bosniak, Croat or Serb. Though Osim was born in Sarajevo, precisely 1 month after the Nazi invasion of Yugoslavia, he was born to a Polish-Czech mother and a Slovene-German father who had relocated to modern-day Bosnia. Osim was only a stopgap, though, before Bosnia's FA would have to democratically elect a president, as UEFA also demands. In December 2012, Elvedin Begic, a Bosniak or Bosnian Muslim, became Bosnia's first elected single president, outlining his ambition, upon being elected, for Bosnia to qualify for the 2014 World Cup and Euro 2016. For all of the chaos off the pitch, which is a feature rather than a bug of Bosnian football, in 2006, 13 of the country's players refused to represent the national team until 4 FA members had been sacked. On the pitch, momentum was building in Bosnia's bid to qualify for their first ever major tournament. Only Portugal, who beat Bosnia 2-0 and 6-2 over 2 legs in 2009 and 2011, had denied them qualification for the previous tournaments in the playoffs after Bosnia finished a highly respectable second behind Spain and France in successive qualifying campaigns. In Euro 2012 qualifying, in fact, Bosnia finished just a solitary point behind France, and they would have qualified ahead of them, but for a controversial penalty which was awarded to France and converted by Samir Nasri 10 minutes from time in both teams' final qualifying Group D fixture. A narrow 2-1 friendly defeat against Brazil during the intervening period, in which Bosnia were only denied a famous draw by a 91st minute own goal, inspired further confidence heading into a qualifying campaign for a World Cup that would be hosted by Brazil themselves. This time around, Bosnia avoided being drawn in a group containing any European powerhouses like Spain or France. Actually, Bosnia managed to draw the lowest ranked Pot A and Pot B seeds in the form of Greece and Slovakia as Pot C seeds themselves, prompting a general sense of excitement and acknowledgement that they would have few better opportunities to qualify for the World Cup. It wouldn't be easy, of course, and Bosnia certainly didn't make it easy, winning the exact same number of points as Greece, but qualifying for the World Cup automatically ahead of the Euro 2004 winners by virtue of goal difference. Bosnia's World Cup qualification provided a rare moment of joy in a divided and deprived nation, as well as serving as an inspiration as to what was possible. The Bosnia team, which had inspired a nation, was made up of Bosniaks, Croats and Serbs. It didn't matter that Edin Dzeko was a Bosnian Muslim and Zvezdan Misimovic was a Bosnian Serb born in Munich. When Misimovic looked up from attacking midfield and saw Dzeko making a run in behind, he didn't see a Bosniak, Croat or Serb, he saw a teammate and a quality centre forward, and he looked to pass the ball to him accordingly. As naive or wishful as it may sound, Bosnia's national team was an example of what was possible if Bosnians of all ethnic and religious backgrounds could come together and unite behind a common cause. Bosnia might have exited the 2014 World Cup in the group stage, but they were fairly unfortunate in more ways than one. Sajid Kolasinac scored a bizarre own goal in their opening game against their toughest opponents, Argentina, and even then, it required Lionel Messi's goal of the tournament to deny them of a hard-earned point. Next up was Nigeria, the likely decider of who would progress alongside Argentina, in which Edin Dzeko had a perfectly good goal disallowed for offside in the pre-VAR era, and despite seeing 60% possession and having a further 19 shots on goal, Bosnia failed to find the back of the net again. Ultimately, a Peter Odemwingie goal was enough to cruelly condemn Bosnia and see Nigeria progress, despite a convincing 3-1 win for Bosnia against Iran in their final group game. Iran's manager Carlos Queiroz, who previously had 2 spells as Alex Ferguson's assistant at Manchester United, described Bosnia as the best team in the group, and Bosnians were able to take plenty of heart from their performances at their first ever World Cup, the average age of their squad, and the general sense that things were heading in the right direction looking ahead to Euro 2016. Bosnia proceeded to win none of their first 4 Euro 2016 qualifiers, losing 2-1 at home to Cyprus and 3-0 away to Israel, either side of draws against Belgium and Wales, leaving their qualification hopes in tatters before 2014 had even come to an end. That saw Yugoslavia legend Safet Sušić, who is arguably Bosnia's greatest ever player, at least other than Dzeko, and had been Bosnia's manager since 2009, sacked in November 2014. He was replaced by another Yugoslavia legend, Mehmed Bajderovic, who was the first captain of the newly independent Bosnian national team in the mid-1990s. Bajderovic actually managed to turn Bosnia's form in qualifying around, winning 5 of his 6 games in charge, but the damage had already been done. Bosnia still went into the playoffs, but we all know how that ends for them. This time it wasn't Portugal, but the Republic of Ireland, who beat Bosnia 3-1 over 2 legs. Bajderovic won 56% of his matches during his 3 years managing Bosnia, which is an excellent record. It's the highest win percentage of any permanent appointment in the entire history of Bosnia's national team, and it put Bajderovic among European football's elite within the international game at the time, despite managing a Tier 2 or 3 national team. Bajderovic departed after his initial 3-year contract came to an end though, despite Bosnia's players, unsurprisingly, being very keen for him to stick around. The Bosnian Football Association also offered Bajderovic a new contract, but he wanted certain conditions to be met as part of the deal if he was to remain in the job. If you're thinking of Rolls Royces and private jets, then I'm afraid that it was something a little bit more modest. First and foremost, he wanted the Football Association to build some half-decent pitches for the national team and youth teams to train on. I know, right? Bit demanding. At the time, they basically only had one. The National Training Centre in Zenica, which Bajderovic, understandably, considered to be unacceptable. The former Ligue 1 star was also keen to call up more players who were born and raised in Bosnia and competed in the country's own league system. But in order to do so, he needed the FA to work towards improving the standard of Bosnia's domestic game. Bosnia's league system ranks as the 40th best out of only 55 in all of Europe, as per UEFA's league coefficients, sandwiched, not so nicely, between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. The Faroe Islands, who rank 1 place above Bosnia, have a population of barely 50,000 people, making the entire self-governing archipelago about the same size as Bosnia's 16th largest city. Bosnia's neighbours like Serbia and Croatia, meanwhile, rank 20th and 13th, and even little old Kosovo comes in 8 places above Bosnia in 32nd. Kosovo, it should be said, only even became UEFA members in 2016, 2 years after Bosnia competed at the World Cup. Domestic football in Bosnia, much like everything else, is blighted by sectarianism. Several of the nation's biggest clubs have deep-rooted religious, ethnic and political ties. 6-time Bosnian champions FK Željezničar Sarajevo, for example, are considered a Bosniak club from the nation's capital, traditionally with a liberal and working-class image. Meanwhile, 2-time national champions FK Borac Banja Luka from Republika Srpska are considered to be a club for ethnic Serbs. The Borac Banja Luka badge literally features a Serbian flag, and the Borac in the club's name translates into English as fighter. In April 2013, that is exactly what Borac Banja Luka and Željezničar Sarajevo fans did when a mass brawl broke out, resulting in 35 fans and 7 police officers sustaining injuries. Over in Mostar, HSK Zrinjski and FK Velej contest one of the bitterest derbies in the Balkans, and there is no lack of competition in that part of the world. HSK, whose supporters are almost exclusively ethnic Croats, were banned by Yugoslavia's communist authorities post-World War II for competing in the fascist HNL League, controlled by the Nazi puppeter Stasi regime. FK Velej supporters, by contrast, are pretty much entirely Bosniaks who have tended historically to be more left-leaning. When HSK were banned, Velej enjoyed considerable success during the communist era. During the Bosnian War, in which there was a secondary Croat-Bosniak conflict, the city of Mostar was effectively split in two parts, the Croat West and the Bosniak East. Since Velez's stadium, the Stadion pod Bijelm Brižigon, and I do apologise here and indeed elsewhere for my pronunciation, was based in the Croat West, they were pretty much kicked out in 1992 and HSK moved in. Velez, meanwhile, were forced to build their own ground, the Stadion Roženi, in 1995. That has unsurprisingly bred fairly intense hatred, though perhaps not quite as much as fellow Croat side NK Siroki Brijeg, whose ultras have espoused ultra-nationalist and far-right sentiments in the past, including brandishing literal Nazi flags, typically in an attempt to antagonise supporters, especially of ethnic Serbian origin. That is just a snapshot of the grievances and divisions that engulf Bosnian football, but increasingly, anger is not just with historic rivals, but with the Football Association and the league itself. Corruption is nothing new to Bosnian football, or indeed everyday life, but it has become especially pronounced in the nation's favourite sport in recent years. In November 2019, Bosnian police arrested 12 people on suspicion of fixing the results of football matches in the top two tiers of Bosnian football. It came as no great shock to many Bosnian football fans, but since then, the degree of suspicion has only increased. In March 2021, Viko Zelkovic replaced Elvedin Begic as the president of the Bosnian FA. Zelkovic is a controversial figure in Bosnia, having previously served as the president of Borac Banja Luka, the ethnically Serbian club with fighter in their name and fighter by nature that I mentioned earlier on, and long accused of corruption with his other businesses. Zelkovic is also the nephew of Bosnian Serb politician Milorad Dodik, who has been the president of Republika Srpska since 2022. Dodik leads the Alliance of Independent Social Democrats, a Serbian nationalist and separatist political party, and he has described the Srebrenica massacre as a fabricated myth. After Zelkovic was elected president, his former club Borac didn't lose another game all season. In fact, they won all but two, going on to claim only their second ever Bosnian championship, ahead of Bosniak clubs FK Sarajevo and Velez Mostar. During that time, it was felt by some people that Borac received some, let's just say, generous decisions from referees, whether that be in terms of penalties or offside goals. Meanwhile, Bosnia's most highly regarded referee, Irfan Pejto, who represents Bosnia in FIFA and UEFA competitions, was mysteriously frozen out during the second half of the campaign. The following season, in 2021-22, Borac fell to third, finishing a massive 30 points behind Croat title-winning side Zrinski Mostar. The FA denied Bajderovic's relatively modest demands then that they actually build some decent pitches, put some effort into youth development, and raise the standard of Bosnia's atrocious and deeply corrupt top flight. I mean, why would they want to do any of that? So he decided not to renew his contract. He was replaced by Croatian legend Robert Prosinecki, who managed to win promotion in Bosnia's first ever UEFA Nations League campaign, but was sacked after finishing fourth behind Italy, Finland and Greece in Bosnia's Euro 2020 qualification group. Bosnia still went into the playoffs by virtue of their Nations League success, but there are no prizes for guessing how that went. Under new boss, Dusan Bajevic, Bosnia lost 4-3 on penalties against Northern Ireland, having drawn 1-1 on aggregate over 2 legs. Since rejecting Bajderovic's demands and losing their best manager, in terms of results, that Bosnia has ever had, the national team has had 6 different managers in only 6 years. During that same time, rivals Croatia, who have taken bronze and silver from successive World Cups, have had just one, Zlatko Dalic. The current national team boss is Savo Milosevic, formerly of Aston Villa, Real Zaragoza and Parma, and if you're thinking that that surname sounds alarmingly familiar, you're not wrong. An ethnic Serb, Savo is a distant relative of Slobodan Milosevic's, though that doesn't mean that he was a fan. In fact, Savo, while still playing, took part in both the 1996-97 Serbian protests against Milosevic's electoral fraud and October 5th revolution, which saw him overthrown in 2000. So far, Savo has had just 2 games in charge, a 2-0 win away against Liechtenstein, and Bosnia's heaviest ever home defeat, as they were trounced 5-0 earlier this month by Portugal. The extent of the corruption in Bosnian football, combined with the national team's miserable form, has resulted in dwindling domestic and international attendances. When faith and confidence in the fairness of football is undermined, it's very difficult to get it back. In 2021, a combination of boycotts and disinterest saw a crowd of just 400 people turn up to watch Bosnia at home against Kuwait. Ironically, though perhaps somewhat unsurprisingly, given the standard of Kuwaiti football, it turned out to be Bosnia's first win in almost 2 years. In response to Bosnian football writer Sasha Ibril sharing an image of the empty stadium and a condemnation of Bosnia's FA on Twitter, Asmir Begovic, a man who has kept more clean sheets for Bosnia than any other person, tweeted, "Correct. Led by criminals. Vico, Misk, Petev, a band of agents. Instead of being a football team uniting a country, we have become an eBay page to fill the pockets of criminals." Ito Van. Begovic had already been frozen out of the national team, and you won't be particularly surprised, I would imagine, to discover that he hasn't returned since then. Not only have fans lost interest in Bosnia's national team, players also seem to be turning their nose up at the prospect of representing them. There has always been a degree to which Bosnian Croats and Serbs have had divided loyalties. Most have tended to support Bosnia's national team, but it is secondary to their support for the Croatian or Serbian national teams. And when the two teams face off, there is little doubt as to who most Bosnian Croats or Bosnian Serbs want to win. There are even Bosnian Serbs, for example, who would support Russia or Greece owing to their Eastern Orthodox traditions if or when they play Bosnia. And the level of support for Bosnia by Bosnian Croats or Bosnian Serbs is sometimes influenced by the number of Croats or Serbs who happen to be in that particular squad. The Bosnian Muslim diaspora population, meanwhile, is larger than the Bosniak population within Bosnia itself. In fact, Turkey alone, with an estimated 2 million Bosnian Muslims, is believed to have a larger Bosniak population than Bosnia, which is home to around 1.7 million. Bosnia have always drawn upon their diaspora population then, whether that be Sajid Kalazanac and Zhevdan Misimovic, who were born in Germany, or the aforementioned Begovic, who was born in Bosnia, but grew up in Germany and Canada. Similarly, Bosnia have often lost native-born Bosnians, but ethnic Croats or Serbs, to Croatia, Serbia, or other national teams. But that has become particularly pronounced in recent years. Josip Šutalo, who was born in Bosnia, represents Croatia. Luka Jovic was raised in Bosnia but represents Serbia. Dejan Lovren was born in Bosnia but represents the nation of his parents, namely Croatia. Even Slovenian superstar Josip Ilicic was actually born in modern-day Bosnia, though his family did move to Slovenia when he was only 1 year old, so that one is a little bit more typical. Overall, though, the list just goes on, and there are concerns that, as chaos within Bosnian football ensues, more and more players will look elsewhere for international exposure and representation. The Bosnian FA have hardly helped themselves upon occasion. If you are familiar with Balkan politics, then you'll know that Serbia is quite friendly with Russia, even following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has left the country isolated in terms of practically every other European nation. In fact, if you visit Belgrade, you won't have to look very far in order to find murals of Vladimir Putin or street vendors selling t-shirts displaying his image. The Bosnian FA's ethnic Serb president Vico Zelkovic, the nephew of Serbian nationalist politician Milorad Dodik, therefore felt that it would be a good idea to organise a friendly between Bosnia and Russia on the eve of the 2022 World Cup, while Russia was suspended by both FIFA and UEFA. Just for context, the only other nations who agreed to play against Russia in 2022 were Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. In 2023, Russia has so far added Iran, Iraq, Qatar, Cameroon and Kenya to that list. Even Serbia haven't agreed to play them yet. The scheduled fixture immediately caused uproar, given that most Bosniaks and Croats are significantly less sympathetic towards Russia and the current Russian regime, and most Bosnian internationals are Bosnian Muslims, not ethnic Serbs. After Bosnia's two biggest players, Edin Dzeko and Miralem Pjanic, not only joined the chorus of criticism for the decision, but also announced that they would refuse to participate, the match had to be scrapped. For Russia, that meant a trip to the Kyrgyz capital of Bishkek instead. The concern for Bosnian football is that, though this feels like an all-time low, things may well get worse before they start to improve. The Bosnian squad is an old one, several of their best players are entering their final years, and there are few shining lights in the way of younger players ready to step up and replace them. Asmir Begovic is already gone, Sajid Klasinac is 30, Miralem Pjanic is 33 and is playing in the UAE, and Edin Dzeko, though he is still going strong for Fenerbahce at 37, won't be there forever. One ought not underestimate the impact on Bosnia when Dzeko finally retires. If you think that things have been bad for the last 7 or 8 years, which they have, imagine what they would have been like without Dzeko, a man who has scored 65 goals from 133 caps. That is the 30th most of any player for any country in the entire history of men's international football, tied with Didier Drogba and ahead of Ronaldo, Rooney and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. One of the biggest problems for Bosnian football, and there are lots of them, is the lack of infrastructure and coaches at the academy level. When you look at the success of Croatia in recent years, you can trace a great deal of it back to the Dinamo Zagreb youth ranks, which is one of the most productive academies in the world. In Luka Modric, Dejan Lovren, Mateo Kovacic, Vedran Čorluka, Niko Kranjčar, Andrej Kramaric, Šime Vrsaljko, and Josko Gvardiol, I don't think that it is any exaggeration to say that Dinamo have produced more great players over the last couple of decades than Bosnia has as a whole. And Dinamo isn't the only outstanding academy in Croatia. It is a similar story, albeit to a slightly lesser extent, in neighbouring Serbia, where Red Star, Partizan and Kukurecki all have youth recruitment, facilities, coaching and development that is incomparable with any team in Bosnia. In January 2023, Bosnia announced that they would be redeveloping the National Training Centre in Zenica in an almost tacit admission that they had screwed up by rejecting Bajderovic's demands. That is supposed to be part of a broader programme of regeneration and investment in the future of Bosnian football. As far as many Bosnians are concerned, they'll believe it when they see it. They have become accustomed to corruption and embezzlement, not just under the current regime, but also those which preceded it. The state of Bosnian football is a grave shame, not only because of its potential and wastefulness, but also because of what it could symbolise. Just as 10 years ago, football represented a rare glimpse into how a nation could, perhaps, one day be united, now it seems to be emblematic of all of the problems that plague every other facet of Bosnian public life. It is no longer a source of optimism or inspiration, but the precise opposite. In 2021, Bosnian FA President Vico Zelkovic's uncle, Milorad Dodik, the Serbian nationalist politician and Republika Srpska president, announced that the Republika Srpska would withdraw from Bosnia's military, top judiciary body, and tax administration, prompting renewed fears of a succession crisis and that the country may collapse. Concerns that Republika Srpska may, at some stage, attempt to declare independence from Bosnia have not since subsided. And if that happens, even the frosty peace brought about by the Dayton Accords is likely to be undermined. Bosnia has among the lowest wages, highest unemployment rate, and worst health and education outcomes in all of Europe. Many young people leave Bosnia for better opportunities elsewhere, typically in the West, resulting in an even more heavily tilted pyramid in terms of demographic aging. The average age in Bosnia now is almost 42, meaning that the country has a tiny player pool from which to recruit, even if youth facilities development and the National Football League pyramid weren't quite so abysmal. Bosnia needs the light relief of football more now than at pretty much any stage since the Bosnian War, but instead, all it has got is a national sport which acts as a microcosm of the country's problems at large. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Enjoyed might be the wrong word. If you found it informative or interesting in any way, shape or form, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Don't be too harsh on my pronunciation. Try my best. And of course, it goes without saying, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for both this channel, HITC Sevens, and also my second channel, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be on or about to appear on your screens now, so it is very easy. I've done all the heavy lifting here, along with a couple of videos that you might fancy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all three, and all of those links plus a whole lot more should be down in the video description below. Cheers.